Welcome everyone back to Tradebusters. It's Monday. We've learned a lot of things over the weekend. The most important thing we've learned is list managers actually work weekends. I thought they were like plumbers. As always, filling a hole on this show is Lecdog. Lecdog, how are you?
Fantastic, mate. I'm glad we had some trades go through that we can talk about. Very excited for Tradebusters to kick off for is this the final week of trade period? I think it is. Ends Wednesday, doesn't it?
Yeah, there still can trade picks. No doubt we'll probably just go back to the Pom and Lecdog show and recap the one trade they do every 6 days during that period. But yeah, we've got 3 more episodes of this left, Lecdog. That'll be exhilarating. We've also got a very exciting a Thursday show where we'll recap all of these. So
we can do the classic "Who won trade period." It'll be good.
Yeah, and we'll fabricate it as we always do. Congratulations to your son on getting his license. Get the gin out, says Greg, and everyone else. We've got James, we've got Lou, Lily, Chill, says Matt Gondolfo, and Ryan and Mel all joining us. But let's go through the weekend trade. Jesus, I mean, honestly, I know the trade period is over the weekend, but I think there's been about 5 trades ever historically on the weekend. And usually they are the most pointless trades of all time. And this one here was actually the trade suggestion we had on episode 1. The only thing that changed was people had basically had worse picks ever than what we did at the start, because of obviously with the AFL's just manipulation of making rules up, giving priority picks and things like that. But pick 4463 found its way to a new home to Hawthorn, and Tyler Brockman finally made his way to the Eagles. And pretty generic trade all round, eh?
Yeah, it is. I think technically on the history of the picks that have been given away, there's potentially more upside for Hawthorn. But to be honest with you, this is one of those ones where if we had real free agency, like he would have just left 3 weeks ago and gone and played at West Coast and got a decent little pay packet. I think Brockman's decent for them. He joins the forward line of Liam Ryan, Jai Cully. Jamie Cripps probably stays in that forward line again this year, but you'd think he's starting to age out. He's what, 30 now, 31 maybe. So I think it's a decent little acquisition for the West Coast Eagles. It saves them a little bit of development time, and then, I mean, for Hawthorn, they get a couple of picks in for a guy that hasn't really featured. So there's not too much to bust on this trade. It's just a pretty stock standard one for a small forward, and it might be one of those ones where you look back in 10 years and that he's a really good small forward for West Coast, but I think in all likelihood it's probably just a guy we never speak about again after 2027.
I mean, it's one of them things, isn't it? Because, I mean, there's a few people asking about Hawthorn. I know that they're big Hawthorn people. This is an interesting one because, obviously, I mean, suspected 44 and 63 by draft time will be probably, 45 and 65, let's just say. And that's being conservative. I mean, obviously, in the draft, they have got a gentleman that they've got to ascertain with a father-son bid, which, I mean, let's be honest, 44 is going to get you, 200 points roughly to it, probably about 150 by there. It's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? Because they are obviously going to have to take him. Do you know what I mean? They're going to have to take him in their picks. But does anyone else think that they're going to trade down on draft night? I get a real feeling that Hawthorn are going to trade down that pick. I know they've been really projected on trying to get old mate pick 1. I think they've sacked that idea off. I've got a feeling that you could see these guys slip back a little bit into... I've got a feeling that there's a trade there to be done with Adelaide.
They've got 433, 44 currently. Adelaide have 10, 14, 20. Maybe they cash in 3 of those trades for 10 and 20. I'm not sure on the maths on that, but potentially they slip back to move up, which is a classic Carlton move, by the way. We do that just about every year at the draft. I think Hawthorn really would have liked to pick 1 or pick 2, and I think they probably now realise it ain't going to happen. So why not cash in? Just by the way, just Tyler Brockwood, we talked about it for West Coast, haven't talked about it. Doesn't really affect Hawthorn that much. I think between your Dylan Moores and I guess they still got 700-year-old Luke Bruce. They've got enough decent small forwards there, but it feels like a position they can fill pretty easily, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I like this one from Christian. I could see a few teams are. Fremantle are targeting. Brandon's asked about them. We'll cover them on the next slide. But I've got them taking Duursma. I think he's the main man for them. I think he suits their list. I do have a sneaky feeling, though, that exactly what Jacob's here. I could see them trading down as well. I think there is merit to be trading down. After this show, my draft profile comes up, mock draft as it stands at the moment. And we talk about how I grade players. And I agree. I think the first 5, outside of that, you've got another 10. And then outside of that, you've got a lot of squad players. I think Hawthorn might be diligent to try and maximise the high potential of the media hype of some of them players in the top 5, Zane Duursma being one of them, and trying to fall down a little bit, just trying to slip down a little bit and have 2 bites of a top 20 cherry.
And with Hawthorn, Pom, they've got a couple of NGA players this year that aren't part of the Sun. Do you see them ending up at the Hawks?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you've got Giaf. Giaf is an absolute splendid player, and if the AFL wasn't corrupt and we just give NGAs to clubs that have a hotter temperate than Victoria or WA, it would be an interesting thing. I mean, there's a great argument there. I mean, that's another argument there. I look at Adelaide and I think, like, if I was them and I could change pick 4 and then think, where's the bid coming in? So at the moment, the bid for Hawthorn's NGA, father-son, is meant to be just at the back end. They're looking at about the picks at the middle of the 20. Most of the draft boards I've seen have him anywhere from 20 to 25. My gut instinct is the lower end of that scale. I don't think people will look at him just because he's landlocked, and it does put a depreciation on historically, particularly in the middle picks. We've seen Essendon try their might in them later picks. People don't usually bid around there, particularly when you've only got a few picks or a legitimate draft strategy. The pick I do see coming from is Adelaide. I do think if Adelaide there at 20, they will have a punt on Will McCabe. They'll definitely force that because he's a South Australian boy. So I think if they change that pick to a 14 and a 20, suddenly they could be in a situation where they get another player in 14 and then 20, they maybe get Giaf, and then the next pick, they'll be able to match it and they get 3 players instead of 1.
I think that's, I mean, I'd like to see it. I think we probably don't think about that enough when we talk about the draft, is the strategy of where you take your players. A lot of the time, AFL clubs, for whatever reason, just seem to take the best players first rather than actually manipulating their opportunities. But I think if you can end up with all 3 of those, of those caliber of players, you're laughing. And we've talked about it before. We really like where Hawthorn's list is. We like how they've done their rebuild, and they're going to add some quality regardless of whether they take their first pick or trade it. I think we're pretty boyish on Hawthorn here, aren't we, Pommy?
Yeah, mate, spot on. I am. I love Hawks, and I agree with Jacob. I think Duursma is a lock if they keep their picks, but I do think that if they can walk away with, like I've just said, with that strategy of moving down, they'll get 3 top 20 players for the price of 1. I think that's a huge win. But end of the day, whatever they do, you'll see it after this, but I don't think my top 3, Brandon, are any different. We've got them next slide. Let's talk about Fremantle after this slide, because this is the big trade. This is the
ultimate tease.
This is what I am about. This is what I'm about. Pick 65 finds its way to Richmond. Big goer. Big goer. He finds his way to North. As we discussed last week, it looks like North are going to focus on more mature defenders to negate their list requirements. And I mean, again, pick 65, absolute throwaway pick. This is something that you wipe your ass with and flush down the toilet. They've got him for next to nothing. We talked about it would be a freebie, so you can come at me and say Pom said they'd get him for free. Pick 65 when it's just going to be a pass is a fucking huge win. It's free.
Oh, yeah. When pick 65 pushes out to pick 75 at a draft where they're projecting like 50 players get taken, it's not a real pick. This is one of those, it'd really just be easier if we let players move clubs way without a trade when they're out of contract situations. But no, he'll join that. And we've talked about this before, Pom, a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. He's been playing a bit more in defense as he's developed. I'll play him in defense alongside Toby Pink, who I don't know. Was that Friday that he got signed by North Melbourne? Because I obviously missed the Friday show. So
it was best name in AFL. I gave him a big rap.
It's very good. So they're starting to. This is we talked about it when we did their preview, right? They sort of need a Band-Aid fix that back line for the moment with is it? Name's escaping me. Griffin Logue out with the ACL. Is it Griffin Logue or yeah? Out with the ACL for the year. So, I mean, I like this. He's probably not going to play, but if he does, he's going to be better than their current key defenders who are Aiden Core, Griffin Logue, who's out injured, Aiden Bonner, and Callan Dawson. So, I mean, at least Biggie's played an AFL game before.
He has, and Christian's spot on. This would have, if they signed him as a UFA, would have diluted the Ben Mackay compensation because such is the world we live in.
Which is another, by the way, is the fact that a Biggie Nguyen could affect the compensation, take away the fact that compensation exists. If getting him in meant that you lost your pick 3 for losing Ben Mackay, who's, as much as I've not shit talked him, but been honest in my assessment of him, he's way better than Biggie Nguyen. Come on. What are we doing here?
Hey, the most Biggie Smalls references we can have in the chat are much appreciated. But you know what I will say about this? He's basically Blair Hartley at Richmond. This trade here is such a monopoly on what Christian's talking about. Because effectively Blair Hartley's rang up Rawlins at North Melbourne and said, tell you what, kid, just pay my coffee tab first day of draft. And they've gone, okay, we'll just do 65. It is a weird thing that does affect it. Like, it's a weird thing. But, I mean, huge win. Good bit of business for both clubs.
Yeah.
To be fair, I mean, big lad wasn't going to play at Richmond. He's played, one game? So that means to me, they just switch it through. And he's going to have an opportunity and a really good chance for Big Ower to really cement his place in the AFL without dropping down to the State League.
Yeah, there's an opportunity for him to fill a role if he's good enough, and if he's not, at least he'll develop down at North Melbourne, where he'll have to be a key part of that VFL side.
Well,
no brainer.
You're all asking Pies questions, so I mean, let's go through them. Should Jamie Elliott look for a new club? I don't think so. I think Jamie Elliott's still got a lot to give to Pies. He's probably got some value though on the trade table, and you've got to remember he's reaching that age that this time next year he probably doesn't have as much. It would depreciate quite a bit, but I do think you look at where Pies picks are this year. There's a few players that are very similar to this gentleman, Jamie Elliott. One of them being Lance Collard, who could really learn a fuckload off Jamie Elliott. And I wouldn't be surprised Collingwood keep doing what Graham Wright has been doing so well and getting them to do it. Would Carlton look at Ash Johnson? I'm a big fan of Ash Johnson, to be fair, but I don't think Carlton will do that. When was the last time Carlton did a deal with Collingwood? Apart from that pick swap last year. Would it be?
Was it Jordan Russell? Has there been one since then?
Could be, actually.
I'll look that up in the background.
But Big T Mello, the big dog, is in chat. He is spot on. Lockie Schultz finds his way. And we talked about this on Friday. I nearly broke the young man's heart. Old Damo talking about this trade. I thought they'd beg for the 19th, Collingwood, and I thought they'd maybe get it through. But it looks like Collingwood, again, fantastic bit of business. We talked about both of these clubs do prioritise player welfare. The trade will get done. No surprise to me, it was first thing today. Future first and 34. Now, I'm going to go on record here. I've seen a lot of Victorians comment that this is overs and Freo have won this trade. I actually think it's a little bit unders because I think Team Mello's nailed it. Their forward line looks mighty tasty with Lockie Schultz. I think Lockie Schultz, very, very underrated. Very underrated. I think he will tear it up in that forward line.
Mate, I'm with you 100%. What is it? It's a first and a second for Lockie Schultz. It's not a very good first and it's not a particularly good second, but it is a first and second for Schultz. I reckon, given where he was asking to go, and in the world that we live in, where you get to go where you asked to go, Freo actually shitted in and got some really solid assets in return. But I am with you that you'd want more because Schultz is the number one goal kicker since Longmuir took over at Freo. So he's their leading goal kicker. He's integral to their structure. He's the right age. He's going to go to a very good side. He's going to be in a side with Bobby Hill and who else have they got? Jamie Elliott, who we just talked about. They're going to be very, very good. And it's really unfortunate that Fremantle lose him. I think they maximised as much as they could on the return. And, the future first, hey, there's a world where a meteorite strikes Amy Park and kills every player at Collingwood and they come last next year and this is pick one. So there is a world, a very unlikely one, where, Freo get the best player in the draft next year.
Mate, I'm with you. I mean, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. For me, for this to work in the favour of Freo, they'd need to finish 5th or lower next year. But I think it's probably about par. Some questions coming in. Lily's asking a few. I'll bundle Lily's up because she asked some good ones. Pick 3 for Rowan Marshall. I think if you were selling Rowan Marshall, Saints, they'd have to ask for pick 1 because I just think with the way Ruckman is so hard at that age, you've got another 10 years minimum of Rowan. I'd be expecting Harley in return.
Particularly one that can go forward and kick goals as well. Yeah, Rowan Marshall, there's not many untouchable players. Every club probably has 1 or 2 they would consider untouchable. He'd be up there for St Kilda.
This is an interesting one. Graham Wright was really adamant today that they're not selling Ginnivan. Now, I would say that Ginny on the open market is probably... You're probably going to get a third, aren't you, at worst? Do you know what I mean? Premiership player, which doesn't... Believe it or not, I know the AFL media like to convince you it does affect trade value. In reality, it's a little bit like putting a racing stripe on a fucking push bike. You ain't selling it as a Bugatti. But you would say he's been in and out of the side anyway. With Schultz there, he's definitely going to be a player that I would have thought teams would have sniffed at. Like, I know Damo scoffed at it. I think if you made this deal a future first and 34 with Ginnivan, I think that's about the money for me of how good Schultz is.
Oh, Schultz is a beast. And I don't particularly love Jack Ginnivan's game, but given he's not even 21 yet, taking a flyer on a guy that plays not regular footy, but has played senior footy and obviously played finals footy, there's an opportunity there. If I was him, I'd be like, if I was Jack Ginnivan, I'd be maximizing the thing is he loves Collingwood, right? So through some tenuous links, I know that he loves Collingwood, loves the club, loves everyone there. But from a purely objective sort of maximize your career opportunity, he'd have some value, monetary value at other clubs, and he could go in and become a best 22 player pretty quickly. But it seems like that's not going to happen.
It does, and I agree with James here. I'm surprised. You know, if Fremantle, like I think James nails it. Fremantle should have been looking at Ash Johnson, but remember that Ash Johnson's brothers, don't they? He's got two brothers. One of them's been delisted by Fremantle, his stepbrothers. So I'd imagine that might work against him. Because Benning is one of his brothers, and McAdam's the other one, isn't he? Shane McAdam. So you would have thought that there might be a bit of issue there. But I agree. I would have thought Ginnivan and Ash Johnson would have been asked for. Do you know what I mean? Would have been in there. Like, for me personally, I would have been trying to add Ash Johnson, adding him into this deal. So you've got that replacement because, like Ken says, they haven't signed anyone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it couldn't happen. I don't know. We spoke about Freo in the lead up to this, and we'll talk about him over this next deal as well. But during this trade period, and we sort of talked about, and I'm not as alarmed at, you know, how many players are going in and how many players are coming out, but I just want to know what the direction is for them. Because when you're not replacing guys with senior bodies and you keep going to the draft, you're just delaying your opportunity, which isn't always a bad thing, but I don't know. Don't you want to maximize your Luke Ryans and Brennan Coxes and Alex Pierces and, I don't know, Shaun Darcy? I've got no idea how old he is. He's probably 25. He's probably really young. But, like, what are we doing at Freo? What are we doing?
It's an interesting one. I mean, we're going to talk about them again with the next trade, but salary cap squeeze, I don't get the impression they have, though. And I think Christian makes a good point as well. I think, you know, when I look at Collingwood's list management, I do want to give Graham Wright props because I was strong when they started trading everyone out 2 years ago. This was genius list management. And I think this is good list management again, because I do see Christian's point that Ginny may stay and he will get games eventually. I'd imagine he wants to play now, though. And I would say there's an argument because they have got some real good young players on that list. Not many people talk about the players Collingwood have that we haven't seen yet. McRae being one, Ed Allen being another. There's quite a lot of youth there that hasn't quite broken through. Just feel that you could, because he's such a brand name, he's in the papers all the time, Ginny. That does affect your trade value because I am obsessed sometimes that some AFL players are based on how many Instagram likes they have with list management.
I mean, it's interesting. Does the marketing come into it at all? I mean, it might. And then other clubs might look at him and go, oh, he's going to the races. He's too much work. It's too hard. I think he has an opportunity if he wanted to leave to establish himself as a solid player. And I saw there that, yes, Elliott is 32, but I agree with Team Mello here, right? 32 doesn't really matter for a small forward. You can see, like, he could play 2 or 3 more years. And by the time that comes around, if you're Jackie boy, you've probably had enough. You're probably off the list by then.
You've got to remember as well, it's the easiest position to draft in the AFL, a forward.
There's always small forwards.
So do you know what I mean? Like, and I agree with T. Mellor. I think Elliott is so intelligent that you'll see like an Eddie Betts redevelopment that instead of playing higher up the ground and being that conduit, he'll just live in the pocket and be that classy finisher. So I think there's a lot of scope. And yeah, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, look, Ed Allen, Finney McRae, Reef. You know what I mean? They've got so many players there that people don't talk about. So I think it's a thing. But I agree with James. I think maybe not this year, maybe not next year. I think Kai's onto it. It's going to be interesting what Collingwood do next year. Do you know what I mean? What Collingwood do. And this is the fear. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is Sarong the next stuck out the door?
He can't be. I mean, that's the fear, but he can't be. You pack the club up if it happens.
It's a bizarre thing, but I mean, they've attacked 2024 quite hard. They've attacked 2024, and this is why, look, I do
like their draft hand, by the way. Yeah,
I do as well. But this is the one that blags my head because I don't quite get 2 things about this trade. One, why they've swapped future fourths at all. Because I think that swap of future fourth, I don't think St Kilda are in the top 8 next year.
I mean, that's just that's just Sauce, right? That's Sauce wanting to win. That's Sauce digging his heels in, and Freo just going, you know what? Who cares? I'm with you. I see St Kilda dropping, but probably not dropping as much as Freo. I think it'll be pretty close to parity. And I haven't even looked ahead. I don't know if any of them, if Freo have any academy players coming up in next year's draft or anything like that. But I'm pretty confident that was just Sauce being belligerent and Freo caving in on the 4th swap.
Well, I mean
the picks might not even get taken in the end if it's like this year.
As it stands at the moment, the top 100 talents that I keep a record of for next year, not one of them is a St Kilda or a Freo guy. So I think that's a really interesting one. And Shaun Darcy's one that I'd be watching next year because I just get the feeling that Jackson's going to become the coup de grace of that team, right? And probably rightly so. But I just think, I've just got a feeling that Team Mellor, I think you're nailing it, to be honest. I think there could be more. And Liam Henry, this is what concerns me. And I say this quite a lot, right? There's a lot of players in the AFL draft. I have this warning thing in the AFL draft. And it's, if you were okay until the last 2 months, I worry about you. Lance Collard is someone that is heavily linked in this draft with a lot of teams. But his year from start to the mid-year was meh. His back end, absolutely phenomenal. Same with Liam Henry. This, by the by, we were talking about this guy getting delisted.
Yeah.
By the end of the season, when he realised that his contract is out, there's maybe a chance to move, this guy turned into fucking prime Ed Langdon, right? Warning signs here, I think, for St Kilda. It's a good deal for them, but St Kilda, I feel like, have fallen for this before, right? With people like Brad Hill, right? Looks really good. Liam Henry, for me, is going to be a wait and see. This is going to be one of them trades that I think at face value, Fremantle have won, I'm going to say. They could really have blown it out of the park this time next year.
Yeah, it's tough, right? This is a real feast or famine sort of trade because I agree. Future second is with a swap of force is probably unders from Freo's perspective based on the second half of Henry's year. But I don't know which half is the real half. Is it the last 10 games where he played on the wing, or was it the first 4 years of his AFL career? I don't know what's real. If it's the last 10 games is the baseline, then yeah, absolutely St Kilda have killed it, and he'll be really good for them playing on the wing, playing under Ross the boss. If he doesn't step up, well then he may not be in the system in a couple of years. So I really don't know which way this one's going to go. I think if you'd asked Damo, for instance, number one Freo fan, halfway through the year, do you want Liam Henry on your list? He would have said no. And then I think if you had asked him at round 23, he probably wanted a first-round pick for him. So in that sense, I think St Kilda have done well.
I mean, it's one of them trades that I'm kind of like 50-50. I think I could make an argument to convince a Fremantle fan it's a great deal, and I could make a St Kilda fan think it's a great deal. But I don't think he's too short, Christian. I think what he lacks in that bulk, he makes up for incredible. I think this is a big misdemeanor in the AFL today, that because people put like Nick Cox on the wing and Jalad Pollock, and everyone's like, oh, we need bigger bodies. I still think that the key skill is exactly like Dr. Doof says here, like Josh Dacos. He's quick, he's evasive, elite engine. He uses the ball well, gets it into the mixer. My two reservations with Henry are this guy is more inconsistent than the fucking milkshake machine being on at McDonald's at 12 o'clock. And he's also got the distribution inside 50 of North Korea. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I just feel like...
He's raw.
Yeah. For me, I feel like if this guy was Errol Goulden, yes, pay a lot of money. But in my opinion, Liam Henry he was a small forward 10 months ago. And even Sauce himself have talked about his wing work, which was kind of through necessity. So, yeah, I just feel that's a lot of money for a guy that he could be good.
He could be good. He could be good. I think that's probably the swap of fourths, is to try and, as much as I don't think they probably get used, is to try and at least minimize that risk. So Sauce in a couple of years can say, oh, well, at least we got that swap of fourth picks. It was only basically a third it cost us. Sauce, by the way, we should note for anyone who hasn't watched all the previous shows, was a big fan of Henry in his draft year and bid on him when he was at Carlton. Like, he legitimately wanted him to beat the Blues. So he's invested. He's invested into Liam Henry.
He does as well, yeah. I mean, spot on. Like for me, yeah, it seems to be a common misconception because people started putting tall people on the wing, which incidentally was started by Carlton because we couldn't find a way to get Will Setterfield in the side. So we just started putting fucking giants on the wing, and then ironically it became a thing. But
yeah, people put players who could run and kick on the wing. That was where we kind of stuffed up. By the way, I do like Fremantle's draft hand next year. Just to quickly touch on it, they've got a future first from Collingwood. So let's call that pick 16, 17 for the sake of for ease of consumption. They got their own pick. Let's call that pick 5. They've got Port Adelaide's pick. That's probably 14, 15, 16. And then they've also got St Kilda's future second, which could be, pick, I don't know, pick 30, pick 20, maybe a little bit sooner than that. So they've got quite a strong draft hand next year. I don't know what the WA talent looks like. You're going to assume that they'll probably go for WA talent more than anything, given the optics that quite a few players are leaving. But I do like they're clearly just abandoning this year's draft, which is going to be really interesting to see how they develop and who they pump games into in 2024. And then they're going all in on the draft next year.
It's interesting as well, because next year, when you look at the WA talents, right, do you know what I mean? You've got a player who's got probably the best name in the draft next year. Look out for him. But Malachi Champion, great name. Like, if you deserve to be drafted, pick 5, you have that name. But he's a potential top 10. They have got a plethora of players, though, that are them horrible players a year in advance that could suddenly be top 10 players. Right?
Yeah.
They've got a low wedge between 20 and 40. And they're the type of players that can really boom out because a lot of them are inside mids. Remember, outside mids are very easy to predict where they'll go. Inside mids are a fucker because they suddenly go. So could be an interesting one for Fremantle, but I mean, we discussed them leaving. I don't want to be too harsh on them because I think you can make an argument for a lot of them leaving because Liam Henry would not be a second, right? Had Blake Acres not been sold for pick 56 or whatever it was. Do you know what I mean? I'd also argue Sarong and Brayshaw wouldn't be so fearsome together if it wasn't for Chera leaving. So there's always them catch-22 things that you know what I mean? Like, I don't deal in if-onlys, I deal in absolutes. So there's that argument there, but I do think next year will be the one that I'd be worried about if I am, because next year's draft, there'll be a lot of teams there who have gone quite heavy this draft, who will have surplus picks next year. And that's when they'll start coming for your Brayshaws, your Sarongs, your Shaun Duxes. And a few of them players without picks need a ruckman. Darcy's one that I would be very worried about because for me, Jackson's going to be the main man there. Darcy needs to be the main man at where he is. I could see Shaun Dux being the big target next year.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be talked about every year, but for sure, if he doesn't sign an extension, he'll be heavily looked at next year. It's interesting. I was just looking at the players they've sent out over the last couple of years. Chera, Akers, Logue, Tucker, Lobb, Meek, now Henry and Schultz. There's some names there, but I think by and large, it's not that different from what other clubs are doing. So I wouldn't panic too much just about the players who are going out. I think it's a bit overblown. A lot of clubs have lost a lot of players over recently, but if the trend continues into next year, that's where you get a bit iffy.
You know, my big concern about Fremantle, I don't want to bag them, right? But they are the 16th oldest side in the league, right? And the 16th most experienced as of now for next year, right? As of now for next year. My big worry about them is they should be in a situation now where they have a real core stability in that team. And that has been disjointed because you look at Chera leaving, you look at Blake Acres, okay, Henry wouldn't have done what he did this year, but that would have been a bit of reliability. So a lot of weight on a very young core, right? That's my issue because they're selling, but who's nominating a go to Freo? Like, you've got Tyler Brockman, who Freo have insinuated they had a sniff at as well. He chose West Coast Eagles. They're the big problems for me with Fremantle is no one wants to fucking go there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I can't explain it. I cannot explain it.
That's just my worry for them. Like usually, like even people are nominating North, man.
I mean, North and West Coast, two of the worst teams we've ever seen, and people want to go there. So,
mate, people used to want to go to Carlton after 28. Will St Kilda take a pick on Sean Maker? They may do. Very talented boy. He was a bit of a naughty boy, though, in his thing, but it'll obviously reflect on his draft position. But if you've got a late pick, it'll be a third. Go out there and do it. Then we've got the hypotheticals. So, future fourth officially in writing at Carlton. Evidently, old mate Nick Austin said, sauce. To follow up, AF Australian media, Bean Australian media, decided to do an article on his relationships with his kids and his wife, which I thought was very interesting. Like as if that's relevant to a trade. But thank you, Harold's son, for that expose on Stephen Silvani.
Hey.
Then there was also a report that they'd offered their this year's pick. Carlton had turned that down because they would like a future deal. So that is another interesting point. So we're going with this. I think a future third will do it. Now, I'll tell you for why before someone in the comments thinks Paddy Dow is
pick Freeman.
Before someone in the comments decides to tell me that Paddy Dow is Chris Judd. He might be Chris Judd now. The reason that I say a future third, and this kind of links to your question, Matt, right, is the third is the most commonly used pick in the AFL, right, to break even, right, in the terms of to break a deal down. It is amazing if you go to a club and say, pick 3 for pick 1. No. Pick 3 future third for pick 1. Yes. Do you know what I mean? It's the deal that we see all the time. So what I was thinking is potentially this time next year, a very good team to look at in this scenario for next year is Sydney. Sydney have got 2 players that are suspected to go probably around that late third. They are NGA players. Potentially one of them, old Mitchie, may rise into the second round. So they're going to be looking at points and things like that. Carlton may look to split pick their future first. And I can see Carlton looking at the future first at a plethora of sides, really. Particularly Melbourne would be one of the sides that I look at, who currently on 2 seconds next year. Carlton will look to trade that down potentially this time next year. I reckon that they'll do it as well. I don't think it'll happen this year. I think it'll happen as the draft builds up next year, this time next year. And they'll split it up because I think they need about 1,500 points max for the Camparellis, even if they have terrific years. So I think this one works for both parties. I could see it, though. If you remember that mega trade I showed you on Friday with Essendon and co, that's been reported today as happening. So you might even get a better pick than a future third.
We hope so. Old Pomstradamus over here. We hope so. But yeah, I think surely everyone who's watching by now knows that Paddy Dow is going to get done for very little. Doesn't matter what he was taken. Doesn't matter what he's done. He won't be on our list next year. I'll take a future third. Honestly, I think I don't really care at this point. I saw someone Albert said, I'd let him go to the draft and tell Sauce to go get. I don't mind the idea of sending him to the draft. The only issue is because everyone's so friendly in the AFL, he would still get to St Kilda and then Sauce would think he'd won. I really want Sauce to have to give up something, even if it's a meaningless third-round pick.
You know what? I agree with Albert because do you know what? Carlton are so big, and I said this, if you actually go back and watch my issues with Jack Martin, I wasn't a fan of taking him to the preseason draft. And the reason I said is that eventually it's going to happen with a good player. And I always feared it would be with ours, to be fair, because I thought at that point in time, we were literally plethora new players, just plethora top 10 players.
And we were also pissing off every club in trade negotiations and bidding on everyone. And I do remember you talking about this.
And there is a reason that we missed out on players like Stephen Cornelio, Papley, and things like that.
Dylan Shield, all that.
These negotiations require a little bit of good faith, and Carlton were a good faith side, and neither will St Kilda. But I do want them to do it because I tell you what, this is back to my point. Carlton are so big that loophole closes. When Nick Austin goes to the AFL and say, look, we were fair, we moved it to a future third, that's probably overs. I mean, well, probably unders what some people are asking. Especially he's come out with Caulfield and saying he wants a second.
Which Caulfield is crazy, by the way, because Paddy Dow's better than Nick Caulfield.
Mental. But what you'll find there with that argument is that it'll literally slam it shut. It'll slam it shut. It'll slam it shut, and we'll get rid of this stupid, not restricted, free agent, contracted free agent. We'll actually have a classification for these players. We'll have a classification that stops the PSD. And that's good for the league because then it's good for the players. It's good for everyone. But I don't want it to be us that does it. I'd rather it be another big club. But
oh, mate, I said this when Cripper was coming into his free agency year with the Camporellis. If us missing out on, like, if Carlton, because I agree with you, it needs to be a big club. If they got rid of compensation because one of our players left, or they got rid of father-son bidding because we didn't get one of our players, or Paddy Dow walked and they got rid of that rule, I'd be so happy, even though it would have, it affects us because we wouldn't get any assets back for those players or in those circumstances. If it fixed the amateurish, they've just signed a new CBA and put out all the deals, and first round picks are going to be getting 150 grand plus, blah, blah, blah. If it fixed that, I'd be so happy. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it'll get done for a future third.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great. It's not shit. I don't hate it. I know there's a lot of people out there.
I want Paddy Dow to leave and have a good career.
There's a lot of people out there, though, that I think really like Paddy Dow, and that's fair enough. But I think your feelings don't add value. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I was going to buy your car and you told me it was your mum's favourite car and unfortunately she's passed away and it's worth $2,000, I'm offering you 1,500. I ain't giving you $2,500 because you've got a good story to tell. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
As Black Dog says,
everyone can tell a story.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Few questions. Can we get Nate Caddy? Well, we're going to have to get into... I mean, by my sheet that I sent Let Dog earlier, where did I have Nate Caddy? You're going to have to be in that 10-11 mark. Do you know what I mean? 10-11 mark. I don't think that'll happen. I don't think Carlton will be willing to trade up that unless the deal is good. And Hayden Crozier, I would say, is 100% no. Carlton did allude that they were looking at options should the key defenders and defensive players not extend their deals. And by reports, they took unders. They took unders to stay at the club. So that is namely Durden and Marchbanks. You imagine that was what they were looking at. So I'd imagine Hayden Crozier is no chance. That's what you got.
Are we going to go through a draft period without acquiring, or a trade period without acquiring an ex-Bulldog? What?
Mate, you never know, mate. You never know. I agree with this. Dow has been a real team player. Yeah. But
agree.
At the end of the day, player first. Do you know what I mean?
I want him. Yeah, exactly. Me not wanting assets back for him is because I want him to be able to get where he needs to go and have a good career. I'm always team player.
Yeah, Josh, if you watch the video that I uploaded today, I explained the strategy. It's actually idiot-proof. It's so good that even my dog understood it. Can we sign Dal still? Remember, Carlton have put a year on, and there's no point. There's no point. So he's currently, if you look at, if you do a list analysis and you judge it two ways: one, how good he is, or two, how much he's picked. He would be sixth midfielder, which means he's got no fucking chance of playing unless someone gets shot, right? No. Literally, like someone would have to be out for a year. Look at his age. His age is at the worst age ever this time next year because you get absolutely shot if you won't play. If you're not in the best 22 by this time next year, he's never going to be as a midfielder. It's never going to happen. So he has to leave and play. Has to play. Or bang. Bang, he's gone.
And, well, actually, if we signed him for one more year in this hypothetical, he doesn't actually make it through to free agency. We'd be in the exact same situation next year if you signed a 1-year deal because he would still need to be traded. And I'm with you, Pom. You add in another year. It's his birthday today, 16th of October. There you go. Happy birthday, Paddy Dow. Didn't get your birthday present. Didn't get to move clubs.
John.
Anyway, yeah, I'm with you. He has to move this year or it's basically see you later. Job's done.
You may do, Packer, but referring back to my original point, if you go by how the players have been selected, Voss doesn't feel like that way. So I look at it this way. Imagine he was your brother or someone that you care about. Would you tell him to stay at a place that potentially in a year's time he is unemployable? Because that's how quickly it works. Unemployable. Underline that, right? Underline that. Unemployable. He won't play AFL football again. Very few. It's like less than 1% of second chance players are inside midfielders, right? It's the worst position. And it's the position that is the highest sought after in the AFL draft behind key position players. And they go high. He's not playing. If he doesn't get 15 games next year at Carlton, he's playing VFL football for Williamstown at the end of the year because St Kilda will close their list spot. He has to leave now. Has to leave now for his own well-being. His own well-being. Do Carlton need a backup row? Definitely not going to happen with two mid-20s ruckmen. Unless
I'd love
they get
it to, but it's not going to happen.
Unless they get rid of Murkoff, but think about player welfare. He's just had a heart problem. And imagine if Carlton bought out his contract without there being a medical certificate so he can't play. He'll got it. So, do you know what I mean? And Sayers nails it. If he's just playing VFL football, he's got about as much chance as Josh DeLuca getting back on the list. So he'll definitely be at St Kilda. And Zach Fisher, if you watch that video, Josh, I explained it. He is literally behind even Kennedy at halfback. Voss, before injury, preferred him playing down back. Let that sink in. So Zach Williams instantly replaces him. This is the next trade. And tell you what, where are you? Mad Gandolfo. Come and see me. You're employed. Great segue. So this one here is what we tried to look at. So this could be a trade. Now, I did a little mock draft today. The video comes out at 8:30. I think I scheduled it. If I didn't, I apologize and I've lied to you. But it was definitely...
You did, Pom. It's scheduled. I'm ready for it. I'm waiting.
8:30. One of the things I talked about in that video was I've got a sneaky feeling, my scouts tell me, that there is a player that no one's talking about at the moment, and he's actually my favourite. If you watch the video of the first 10 players, we did mention him, and the second video comes out where we focus on this kid, a guy called Jake Rogers. Absolute terrific footballer. Diminutive, gives me Mark Murphy vibes with pace. I've got a feeling my scouts, my spies, tell me there is a couple of clubs that are linked with him who are picks 10, 12 around that part, which is about 4 picks probably earlier than he's scheduled to go. Now, if that happens, they are fucked. They are going to need to change, exactly like Max says, a pick in its 30s, they need the extra 300 points. So this could be where this trade comes in, right? This is where it comes in, and says, I'll answer that with you, right? They're going to need some more points. So this is where they may look to turn one of their 30s, which is lower value, give it to Carlton on the back end of a deal for Elijah Hollands. Now, this doesn't really pay Carlton, but I will say this. Nick Austin wanted the picks in the 20s that he knows are about the mid-20s by draft night. And I am telling you now, aside from the taller guys, there is a couple of rooks there. And to answer your question, the best rook in the draft is Ethan Reid. He's going to Gold Coast. Second best is Mitch Edwards. Very young, though, very raw. Something that Carlton wouldn't look at. But you look at the guys in the mid-20s, aside from the taller players, which is Archer Reid is around there. There's about 2 rooks around there. You're putting a blanket over these clowns. A blanket over the clowns. It is literally the same person copied and pasted in that draft scenario. So for Carlton having 2 picks there, they don't care. Basically, all of them have got the same negatives, the same positives. Some play a bit more attacking, some play a bit more defensive. So for Carlton, they will look at that and go, if we slip 6 picks down, who cares? Do you know what I mean? Who cares? They won't care. So that's why this trade here works, because to answer your question, they've done their points based on where people would go if you went priority order. So that would be pick 2, pick 4, and then pick 16. If Jake Rogers is anywhere before 16, which I think there is a high chance, they need 200 to 500 more points. Otherwise, it eats into next year's draft. It's called deficit. And they also want to get Will Graham this year, and they have confirmed that. But there's 2 players next year in the top 50 of the draft. One have been a guy called Leonardo Lombardo, who is top 10. So I reckon this could be the only way that happens. But it does sound like 20s, a swap of 20s and 30s has been reported by a few journalists this afternoon. And that's the only way it gets done. And I think that this here works out.
Yeah, no, I think it's solid. Kai Broom says, does that value Hollands at 54? Is that really his value? Look, he's worth way more than that, I think, to be honest. What we need to consider is, the points don't really matter when you're doing this sort of trade for Carlton. So I don't like evaluating players on the points value of a trade when the club acquiring the player doesn't need points. So that's one thing to consider. The other thing to consider is that Hollands is on 400, been reported to be on 400 grand plus at Gold Coast. So that's a negative, probably, given his output and the average salary. That's a negative, because you could just get in a draftee at 150 grand, really, to, in theory, replicate his actual output. Obviously, when you're buying, you're hoping for the upside. So basically, he's not worth that much to Gold Coast. We're banking on the upside. And as Pom said, which I think is a great point, is that the difference between pick 26 and 36 isn't that much. Just like the difference between 17 and 21, to me, isn't that much. So I think the important thing to remember is, heading into this draft period, we had, Pom, what was it? Was it pick 15 or pick 16 and pick 69 were our first picks?
Yep.
So now we're looking at having an established player who was a first-round draftee a couple of years ago coming in, having a pick in the early, well, technically it's the first round, but really it's the second round. And then if it's 36 comes in, that's another opportunity to bring in someone young. So I'm pretty content with where we're at.
Yeah. Jason, all the picks have a point system. So pick 1 is 3,000 points. If it's a father-son or an NGA, that gets matched. You get a 20% discount to match it. So that's 2,400. So that's basically a discount. So at the moment, if everyone goes in order of good to shit, Gold Coast have enough points. However, the massive reports at the moment are Jake Rogers has gone up some boards, and players a little bit higher up people are looking at him. And I've got a feeling that Hawthorn, if they do trade down as well, are going to be the dickheads in this draft. And I reckon they'll start picking on other teams. So hopefully that answers it. If not, just DM me, Jace. You follow me everywhere, and I'll try and explain it as best I can. But we will cover it up all the time. So Kai, what I'm trying to say is, if you look at it, their ability to do these deals, if these picks come through, is very stymied at the moment, because I don't see anyone being willing to take their later picks and bring it up to the necessary points value. This time next year, they've confirmed Gold Coast they don't want to go into deficit. And that's because there's a few players in the top 30 that will be, again, academy players, and they don't want to keep doing this. They don't want to do this. And next year, I think it's going to be even harder to trade, because it's getting closer to them future first. Might be your last draft before Tassie come in. So the reports, I agree with Mitch Cleary's logic, which is based on this, that they will do a little sweat. Now, I do want to read you something that's very interesting. Gold Coast came out today and pretty much said Elijah Holland is dog shit. Well, their list manager came out today, and one of the phrases they used is Bailey Humphries, Flanders have all gone above him, but we've played him out of position for 2 years, but he hasn't taken his opportunities. And generally, when a club says that, they don't really value the player. And he was really non-committance on what he was after. And he said that if it was a later future pick to help with points next year, or if there is a risk of them being without points this year, they do feel like they need to have some more points to get their academy kids this year. And I think that makes sense. Like I say, I do think that they will get a bid around 10 to 14 on Jake Rogers, which is probably about 4 picks earlier than they pre-planned. So that would make sense, that if 32 goes up, they put that 36 up. That's probably a useless pick for them. 25 comes up, that 26 comes in, that gives them extra points and gives them a lot of flotation room in the AFL draft as well, should picks happen later, which we have seen before. So I think that'll be a really interesting one to watch, and I think that helps. That works out both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think we're sitting here saying Elijah Holland's going to go to Carlton and be a superstar. He may not even be in the team. He's going to be competing with your Cottrells, your Fogartys, your Cunninghams for a position in the side. And he's a bit younger, and there is a bit more upside there in theory, but it might never happen. But ultimately, the cost here for Carlton's minimal.
Mate, I love it. North should take Watson, in my opinion. He's a very, very, very good player. Very, very good player. If you look where North are in a real interesting position, because they've got 2 and 3. And I actually think, there's a lot of rumours that they're going to use 2 and 3 for 1. To be honest, 2 and 3 this year, it's technically 3 and 4. And I just think it's ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? I think it's ridiculous going for pick 1. I agree with North, but on the flip, if I was the Eagles, I'd want 2 and 3, right? For 1, because Harley Reid is that damn good, right? And if you watch my video later, I explain I have like a 4-tiered system for draftees. I have gold, silver, bronze, and then paper. Gold is top 5 in the league. Silver is top 10 on that respective list. Bronze is best 22. And then paper is best 30 role player. I think there's only 2/3 gold players. And Colby McKercher is the third gold behind Walters and Reid. I think he's the most complete player. I think he is absolutely impeccable. After that, I think you're clutching at straws. I think they're all very good players. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting what they do. 2 and 3 for me, you've got to nail if you've got there. Have to fucking nail them. Because if one of them's wrong, you look like a dickhead.
Yeah. Yeah, and a number 1 pick will hold its value as well. So if they take Harley Reid, who, the world has decided is the number 1 pick, who, by the way, Jed Walter would go number 1 in a real draft. even if Harley Reid fails in the first couple of years, he's going to retain value. Whereas if you trade out pick 1, bring in 2 and 3, and you grab a Dersmer or a Sanders and they don't perform, they're not going to hold their value as well. So it's tough, right? Because West Coast need more than one good player. But Harley Reid is clearly the best player available to them. So I understand why. I can understand both arguments. Yes, 2 and 3, I can get 2 really good players. I'll let Harley Reid go somewhere else. He might not be the be all and end all. It'll be fine. And then the flip side, I can see why you trade for number 1, because you don't have to think. List managers really don't look like, you don't want to look like an idiot. So if you could get pick 1, your job's done, because no matter what, you're getting the best player. And if he doesn't perform, it's not your fault, because he was the best player. It just didn't work. So yeah, I don't know, Pom. I don't know.
You see, if you get 2 and 3 wrong, you look like a dickhead for not trading for 1, because Harley Reid is a no-brainer.
Yes.
Harley Reid is 250 games, all Australian. We're having a conversation of top 5 players in the league in 4 years' time, right? If they go 2 and 3, and I think there's so much you could go wrong, right? So much could go wrong with 2 and 3, right? Because you could go Curtin. I agree with Curtin. Thank God Curtin said it. When I come into the AFL, I'm going to be a midfielder. He's reverse Brodie Kemp, right? He's reverse Brodie Kemp, where Sauce got excited because Brodie Kemp went into the midfield after his coach said, we're trying to improve his draft profile. And he was like, he's a midfielder. In reality, he is going to be a natural midfielder. He was down back, right? But then he went to the midfield. He excelled. But is Dan Curtin pick 3? I'm not. I think he is, right? But then I think there's easier options. Zane Dersmer's terrific, and he's a good argument for 2 and 3. Riley Sanders has been linked, and they're going to get him. But I think that's a huge risk. Huge risk. I do think if they go, my opinion, I don't want to spoil the video next, but I think McCurtain and McKercher, you go that way, Curtin and McKercher, you've won the battle. But Harley Reid is that damn good. Do I get Nick Dacos vibes, which I nearly exploded with excitement last year? No, I don't. But I do think Harley Reid is the type of player that you notice him when the game's on the line. And if North are to win a flag or whoever picks him up, he will be a big, big part of that. He is a game-changing player and an impact player. But Harley Reid will need the players around him. Nick Dacos is the provider. He's the finisher.
I'm not suggesting that Harley Reid's small, but what I like about him is that he doesn't necessarily rely on beating up on smaller players to succeed. Often we see in drafts, you see these big 190 plus centimeter mids dominating the juniors. They get drafted and they're not that good because they actually have to rely on skill when they're playing against men rather than size. But Harley Reid is skill and tenacity, and he's something else.
Very good player. And tell you what, we'll finish just quickly, just for you, Jace, because I like you. Look, I made a little thing because I did this to explain to a good friend of mine who, no disrespect to him, but he ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. So this should be easy because I did it so it's easy for him. Right? I did it for his easy. Now, I'm not suggesting anyone in the chat isn't a sharp tool. I'm just saying it makes it easy, right? So what you'll see here is on that screen, on your left-hand side, that's how much the pick is worth. And on the right, with discount, that's how much it is theoretically, right? So we'll do a little bit of an exercise. If I bid on this, and we'll change the color to separate it. If I bid pick 2, right, to match it, right, I need to add to them points, right? So, but to match that bid, I don't match that value. It costs the club pick 2. They're paying 2,500. Because it's my player, I only have to match that figure, right? So I only have to match that figure. So pick 2, right, costs this 2,517, but to match it, because it's my player, say I'm Gold Coast, you put big 2 on Jed Walters. I only have to find 2,014 points, right? So that can be done a multiple of ways, right? And it goes until the debt is cleared. So let's take Gold Coast. Gold Coast picks.
They got picks in the 20s. Yeah.
Right. So look, right. So let's just say Gold Coast have got these 2 picks here for argument's sake, right? Added up, that's 1432, right? They also have, let's just say they have pick 28, right? So now these 2 here are over that price, right? But let's just say for argument's sake, it's 2,000.
Yeah.
But let's just say that would then wipe that debt out, right? So that debt is gone. I match bid 2. My 3 picks that equate to 2014 are now dead. To make it even more accurate, I do believe, here we are, Gold Coast have pick 60, a pick in the 60s. So if I actually add that, so they would probably do their pick in their 30s, which I think is 550. So there, look. So that would basically mean they would lose 22, 24, and a pick in their mid-30s. So that would basically mean bid 2 is matched. So whoever bid here now owns this pick. It'll just shift to that pick. And then I would lose 22, 24, and 32. And then that's gone. But a good way to look at it here is Mrs. Pom described this back to me in the best way. So I'm going to do this. To put in a bid versus buy price, right? Is Mrs. Pom described it this way. For every other club that's trying to bid on an NGA or a father-son, they're shopping at Carlz, right?
Yep.
However, if you own them, you have a Costco card, right? So let's just say this is a 24-pack of Coca-Cola. It costs 3,000 points, but if you use your Costco card, you only have to pay 2,400 points. So you make that up through your remaining picks.
Yep. And you get first dibs on the Coke. If someone else is trying to buy your Coke, you get to choose to, no, I'm gonna use my card and buy it at a discount, so you can't have it.
Yeah. So hopefully that helped. I agree with Jacob. He will be unreal. He'll be unreal. He will be absolutely splendid. But hopefully, did that make sense, chat? Don't be afraid to say if you didn't. I'm here now. I'm here in maths mode. But that's a good way to look at it. Look at that. And it's literally less 20%. So starts at 3,000, 2,400 to match, so on and so forth. But I do think there is a resource. If you look at this, a good way to get around it, pick points. Right? Use this pick calculator here. That I've just put in chat. That'll tell you the points of every pick. You've just got to imagine there is a 20% discount on whatever that spits out.
Yeah.
Right? 20% discount. So imagine you're in Kmart, 20% off. 20% off. Hey, Albert, mate, I'm a northerner. I'm tighter than a frog's ass. So 20%, mate, I love it. Is it still possible to get caddy? Carlton could potentially trade up. They'd have to trade up to a pick that's in that top 10 sphere. 11's cutting it fine with the matches. So you'd be looking at teams like Geelong, Essendon, Adelaide. Adelaide, I could see them wanting to slip back because next year they've got a player called Tyler. Crozier looks like it's out of the window. His agent's already said they're going to look to re-sign on a low wage. There is talk that he's going to be rookied, and Carlton pretty much curbed that when Nick Austin did his interview 2 weeks ago when Marchbank signed that is them done for any defenders. So, chat, we'll be back tomorrow. Hopefully this time tomorrow we have Carlton news, and hopefully we've got a 4-way trade. But thank you very much for your love and support. Make sure you check out the video that goes live in 20 minutes. I'll be in the comments, so if you want to ask any questions, ask away. But we've got my first round mock draft as of 1 o'clock today, because I can't remember if any top 20 picks have been changed down today. I don't think they have. But every time you do one of them, some idiot goes, they don't have pick 20 anymore. So come and see us tomorrow, though. Me and Let Dog will be back. Much love. Look after yourself. God bless. Peace.
Go Blue.